Next is Eastorm looking to drop their entire roster except for Countxr. Is retaliation-esque is what I would call it. Or, in other words, typical. So let's take a look at Xbox in the 2019 PCL so far. Eastorm, Bust Down, Low Key Esports, Retaliation, and Radiant have all made roster changes more than once this season through 4 weeks. 4 weeks of play, and all of those teams have made changes in their rosters so far more than once. That is 5 teams. In Xbox, there's only 8 teams. That leaves out 3 teams. You can throw Viral in there because they've brought in a new player, Umeta, as their sub, and they also had to sub Forever Alice in during week 2, I believe. So you could throw Viral in there too. So that leaves 2 teams that have not made roster changes, and that's Cyclone and Elevate. So if you take the 8 teams and you say, who's the top 2 teams? It's Cyclone and Elevate. So I think the trend is you keep making roster changes and you keep not being good at the game, okay? Things like when Retaliation's captain drops 4 players, or when Eastorm is trying to drop 4 players except for their captain. I think what is being said above anything else is that you can't trust that captain. You can't trust that captain. And it just makes the captain look worse. Okay? Countxr is a decent player. He's arguably the best player on Eastorm. But the problem is that they've had a different 5th man every week. Struck User is their 2nd best player. And if I'm them, if I'm Eastorm, here's the lineup I'm going with. Okay? There's nothing wrong with the players that you've had so far through the season. It's just that you believe they're not performing. You're in 3rd place still after losing to Retaliation. The lineup I'm going with is I'm throwing Dishonor back in there because he's good. Undulant Gaming is a decent support player, and he's consistent. Countxr is your best player, arguably, so I'm putting him back in there, and he'll play DPS. Then you have your last 2 roster positions. Struck User is going back in there because Struck User is the 2nd best player on that team. Dishonor is being placed in there by me because they play better with Dishonor on the team. That's against anybody. So you have Dishonor, Struck User as your 2 front lines. You have Undulant as your support, and then your DPS player is Countxr. Now for your flex, your 2nd flex player next to Dishonor, I think you'd have to go, not Lion. That guy underperformed. I don't know what he was doing on Strix, but he underperformed. Countxr had to play DPS on Fish Market because of a trade problem, but he played fairly well as an off tank. So I think if you put Countxr in there, that'll be okay. Dishonor can play the flex, but find a 5th player. If you're going to make a roster change, just find a 5th player. Dishonor, Struck User, Undulant, and Countxr. That's a strong lineup right there in itself. That could still beat Retaliation. That could possibly beat Low Key Esports if you work together, if you start reviewing VODs, and if you start playing the game and learning the game. Other than that, you guys are just running in there like ranked monkeys every single week with different players. There's no chemistry. There's no chemistry. There's no chemistry. Same for Retaliation. Making roster swaps is not going to make you a better team. Granted, roster swaps are needed once in a while. But 6 out of 8 teams have made roster changes more than once. And the 2 that have made 0 roster changes are in 1st place. Come on. Come on. Come on.